On to our top story this hour. Now, if you're planning to order a laptop or a tablet, you might have to wait a little longer and maybe have to pay more. Why, you ask? Well, the central government has placed restrictions on the import of laptops, tablets and computers with immediate effect. So any company that's planning a sale in India of these electronics will now have to seek permissions or have a license from DGFT for their inbound shipments. Now, this has been done to promote domestic manufacturing, considering electronics imports in India are the second largest. Secondly, the government also claims that there's some security concerns with respect to the hardware of these devices. But then there are certain exceptions too. We'll discuss what those exceptions are and how this decision will impact your next purchase. I'm now joined by Tarun Pathak, who's a research director at Counterpoint Research, and also Mahesh Jaising, who's a partner at Deloitte India. First, let me come to you, Mahesh. Was this decision along expected lines, considering that 65% of laptops and gadgets are imported, while almost 100% of smartphones are assembled or manufactured in India?
Well, the decision wasn't really expected, so it's caught a little industry a bit by surprise in terms of it being immediate effect. Has the government been making steps to encourage manufacture? Yes. There's currently a PLI scheme as well that's announced. Has there been many takers? Not that I think that there have been too many. And I do think that there has been a constraint under the customs regulation, because India is a signatory to the Information Technology Agreement, and therefore we've not been able to disincentivize trading, and therefore this notification does come in the spirit of having more security and controls. And there is also a stated position that over a period of time, this should encourage manufacturing in India.
Right. What's your take, Tarun, on this? Mahesh says that this wasn't something that the industry was expecting, but then has come as a shocker. What do you think?
Absolutely, I agree with Mahesh on this. I think more important is the timing of this order. We are entering into a very important festive season, and festive season, the Diwali month, almost contributes to 20% of the annual sales. A lot of people are actually saving money to basically spend during this time. And a lot of these purchases are planned around this season. And now if anything happens in terms of demand versus supply mismatch, the brunt will be on the consumers, because what we can expect here, the offers will run dry. So basically the kind of discounting a consumer was expecting during the festive season, we might not be able to see the same because 92% of the market is controlled by 5 brands here. And we think almost all of them will be impacted. Like you said, 35% of the local assembly is happening, and much of the segment was reliant on the importing of the products over there. So yes, there will be an impact for sure.
Right. So you say that there will be an impact for sure. But Mahesh, do you want to elaborate on what kind of an immediate impact do you see in terms of, the prices of these items perhaps getting more expensive? In fact, getting licenses might be a problem, and hence that could disrupt supply chain. What do you think is going to be the immediate impact that consumers and the industry will see in the next couple of weeks?
Well, I do think while Tarun did talk about the midterm to long-term impact, from an immediate perspective, the notification takes into effect as of yesterday, the day of notification, which means that technically you are allowed to clear the goods only on having a license. And a license doesn't come in a day. It takes few days because there's a process that needs to be followed. I, for one, am optimistic that based on feedback given by industry, there may be some grandfathering of saying whatever shipments are already in the port and what are the, shipments that were ordered prior to this date. I don't know what the nuance and what the final decision would be, but at least if we look at category 1 of immediate business not coming to a stop, I'm hoping that that may come through and should come through. But one also needs to look at a medium term, that would the license, has there been licenses or restriction-based licenses in the past granted? Yes. So it's not that it has not been and there's going to be too much of ambiguity, but it's a process that the companies will have to go through and satisfy the requirements and norms that the government may bring about, particularly to meet the safety hazards and security hazards that they've called out. There was also a tweet by the Honorable Minister of State of IT, where he explained the genesis of the thinking being more around the security, aspects on this particular set of products.
Right, but to ask you what kind of security ramifications do, products like laptops or tablets really have? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
There's no real specific guidance, but if you've seen, it's not uncommon worldwide in networking equipments to have, guardrails and checks and balances, because there could be, the government wants to ensure that the products that come in a finished product form don't have any, potential risks from a safety perspective, from a national lens security. Now, I really don't want, I can't really speculate exactly what element of a laptop could have a security risk, but I do think that that's one position. It's not being called out very specifically that this is for Make in India, but I do think that it's also done in a way that we would be encouraging this manufacture in India, and therefore those norms can well be implemented from a hazard perspective if you're manufacturing in India.
Right. So I'm going to be coming to manufacturing in India, making in India aspect and policy of the government. But let me also ask, Tarun, do you see the industry lobby for a time extension? What really are you expecting? You must have been in talks with all of these consumer tech players as well.
So yes, I think there will be a request for extension on the same, especially like I said, we are entering into a very crucial segment for all the players. So I was going through some of these Facebook comments from some of the retailers yesterday, and there was very interesting conversation that was happening. One of the retailers was putting it up on the Facebook and saying, hey guys, if you want to buy a laptop, buy it now, otherwise the prices are going to increase by 30%. And obviously I don't know what that 30% number came out, but there is some kind of sense that that is going to trigger the fear within consumers. Oh, everything is going to get costly, or it may be a one way of retailers getting rid of the excess inventory or making people more nervous on this order, or maybe they are looking at it in another way as well. So I think in the market, there will be some kind of demand versus supply mismatch. And at the same time, the end consumer also do not know the fine details of this order, right? For them, they are most concerned about their end product, whether they will get on discount what they have perceived a couple of months back. And another point is we are talking about category that goes into the enterprise level as well, because it's not only about the end consumer. And I think that's where the safety part comes into picture. But having said that, this entire category has been around, and the same brands have been around for almost like decades, right? So there is nothing new in terms of, let's say, BOM cost or the another components that are going additional into that. So I think the main agenda here could be driving the PLI 2.0, which is very important, because out of all the PLI schemes that have announced, the IT hardware was the one that was the takeoff was very modest. Only a couple of players actually got into it and availed the offers. But now we believe with the incentives being doubled up, and there is a lot of focus that is going to be in there, because the entire semiconductor content in the IT space is also very high, while other components might go to 23-24%. In the IT hardware side, this can reach as high as 40%. So localizing these categories will be very important to the entire semiconductor push that is happening right now in India. So I think it's a mix of various factors that are going into, but I think the manufacturing will remain the core part of it, what we are discussing right now.
Right. So you say that manufacturing is going to be a core part of, this move, this decision that's been taken by the government. And very interesting point that you make about weaving the semiconductor ecosystem within this, because India is batting big for establishing its own semiconductor ecosystem in the country. In the past few days, we've also seen announcements coming from Micron, from Applied Materials, and AMD. In fact, very recently deciding to invest 400 to 500 million in India to establish R&D and other centers, etc. But Mahesh, coming to you, while India speaks about building an Atmanirbhar Bharat, making in India, and not just making in India, but making for the world as well, we've been doing great as far as smartphone exports are concerned. We've been doing great as far as establishing India as a very trusted partner for global supply chains, and numerous brands like Apple have seen we've seen a shift to India as part of the China Plus One strategy. What do you think it does for the Indian manufacturing ecosystem?
See, one important nuance to discuss, because it's sort of the elephant in the room, from a customs duty standpoint for smartphones. If you import a smartphone, it's 20%. And if you manufacture the component at the component level, right from population of the PCB and go down, your duty level is very, very negligible. But coming to the IT hardware products that are in the current notification, which is the topic for today, the finished products are already at a nil rate of duty, and the components are at nil. So unlike in auto sector, telecom sector, where the government has been able to encourage manufacture by, in a way, imposing customs duty on the finished products within the boundaries of the rates that are there, IT products has always been a tough one because the products are at nil duty and the components are at nil. Like Tarun was explaining earlier, the PLI 2.0 is indeed a great incentive as well. They've expanded the nature of the benefit. But what is still missing is an inability to bring in a financial liability or a customs duty on a finished product. And I think harmoniously, when you see these aspects, I think the current decision is also directionally done to address, of course, the safety concerns, which we don't have the nitty-gritties on, but also to encourage the manufacturing given the customs duty constraints that the government has to, or which I just explained.
Right, let me now come to you, Tarun. Do you think the Indian ecosystem, manufacturing ecosystem or assembly ecosystem is ready for an assembly or manufacturing of this magnitude?
I think so. I think Mahesh raised a very important point in terms of the components localization here in India, because if you look at for the phones, we had this phased manufacturing program previously to PLI. So you had this component being phased out, localization is happening, but nothing happened on the IT side of things. So as of now, if you look at if we compare within the sectors, we do not have a great level of localization of components happening in the IT hardware sector, right? So the only way to look at it is, first you go for the assembly, which is like basic assembly. So we are not talking about advanced level of assembly here. If you look at right now, this entire category of laptops, workstations and all, the size of the industry is close to, in terms of volume terms, very much closer to 13-14 million per year. And the capacity you have only a couple of players assembly that are doing, talk about Dixons of the world or others, Dell is doing, then you have HP, Lenovo, but the assembly lines are not that much that we can scale it overnight. So it will happen over a period of time. So unlike in smartphone market, given a chance, India can assemble as big as like 450 million phones in a year, but the demand and the supply is like we are able to touch only 300, but we still have that vacant 115 million additional assembly lines where we can put in additional phones. But that is not the case with this industry. It runs on a very neck-to-neck basis in terms of assembly lines and the products being produced. But going forward, what I think now this particular announcement, what that will do is that will localize the assembling process first. That is the step number one. And then it will go on to the advanced assembly, where we call it as SMT, localization of the components, low-hanging components. Maybe it will be battery first, packaging, cables, chargers first, and then we'll see that expanding going forward.
Right. So very, very important points raised. Mahesh and Tarun, thank you very much for joining us on this broadcast. So you were saying that localization of components, while that has been done for the mobile smartphone manufacturing ecosystem, but that still needs to happen for the rest of the ecosystem. And that's going to be one big ask of the sector from the government. On that note, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on Startup Central.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In a